Greetings and welcome to this episode of Everyday Enchantment. I have one of my regular favorite badass hosts back to join us for a special holiday edition. We are going to be talking about all the messiest of holiday situations with your family, particularly when you are no contact, which means you're not talking to a family member or family members, how to navigate all of this and not lose your sanity. So welcome to the podcast today, Kelly Backert. Welcome. Okay, before we start, because I didn't really give a bio in case somebody has missed your episodes are some of the most popular episodes on the podcast. So thinking a lot of people have already seen you before, but if you haven't met Kelly, Kelly is the owner of Core Bar and Yoga in Bel Air and also newly opened in Perry Hall. So if you are local, you got to check that amazing shit out. She also owns Core Boot Camp. She's a personal trainer. She is a kind of a weight and diet, like helping people really break out of kind of like the diet hustle culture that we've all found ourselves in. And she's one of my best friends and we both are because we lived kind of the most kind of traumatic childhood. We talk a lot about navigating family dysfunction because we both have lived it, living it, practicing it, you name it. So welcome today.
Yeah, this is fun.
This is always fun, right?
I think this plays off if people are listening to this and they want another one to listen to, I think what we're going to be discussing today, also the last podcast we did. What was the last one?
Friendship.
Yeah. I was thinking about that before we got on. I was thinking there was things that we talked about on that like will be how there are things that correlate kind of similar
absolutely.
to
I'll link it in the show notes so everybody can find it easy.
Yeah, that's a good one too. I think that if you're watching this one, I think that's a good one too because that's another kind of relationship. It's similar. I think you can navigate it in similar ways to what we're going to talk about today with families too.
I agree. And being authentic, which is I think is the hardest thing. I always say you can have done all your spiritual practices, you can feel grounded, you can feel really, really calm and clear, and then go spend a weekend with your family and find out you're 10 years old again, or you're being triggered by whatever it is. And everything that you feel so peaceful about usually is getting turned upside down. I always say it's like the PhD level of like a practice in the world. I don't like to use the word work anymore, but practice around how do we navigate things. And I think for so many generations, we all were told your family's your family. You just put up with it. You just, whatever it is, you're just supposed to kind of, I don't know, for me, bite it, swallow it, just go along with it. And that shit just don't fly anymore. Right?
It's too bad that it has to be that way in terms of like, I think there's a lot of judgment that people like. I know for me, I do not speak with my mother or my father. And when I say that to someone, it's most of the time the reaction is very, well, they're your mother and father.
Yeah.
And no matter what, you're supposed to be in this relationship with them.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because without even hearing any background, they'll say things like they have no idea the abuse, what happened, but there's always this, you should be the person that forgives.
Yes.
You should be the person. It's an interesting, I think sometimes when people react to me in that way, I think it just triggers something within them because maybe I just think it takes a lot of courage and strength to be able to set boundaries when you've been in an abusive situation.
Yeah.
It was your I always want to say to them, which I usually just don't get into it with people unless I really
no, but say it here. Let's put it out there.
If it was like a neighbor who had done something to you, like sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, or a friend, then that's acceptable for you to not. Of
Mhm.
course, everyone would be so accepting of like, of
Mhm.
course you're not going to be in a relationship with them. Of course you're not going to talk to them.
Yeah,
But
it's true.
when it comes like if it's your mother or father, it's like just different rules apply and that's all you have and that's all, and like none of those things are true. Those are like it's just like such a very outdated thing and I I don't think that people understand. I'm just going to say this one thing and I feel like I'm saying too much, but
No, I love everything you're saying.
I wanted to say this one thing and it's when people when you go no contact with your parents, I don't think people understand. It's not like this idea like, oh, they didn't send you your money for
Right.
Christmas or something.
Or
Like,
birthday,
for
they
Christmas.
skipped, they forgot my birthday
Yeah,
one year.
I
Yeah.
don't think that people understand
Mhm.
the guilt and the shame and all of the things that I mean, it's a very difficult thing. It's
Yeah.
not the depths of hell that is is
Mhm.
is like the and the pain.
Yeah.
It's unbearable,
Yeah.
really. And so for people to but I also think on the other side of it, it takes courage and it takes wisdom and it takes well for me it's just like an inner peace now that I have
Mhm.
because of it because I've let that go. And I think but so I kind of just don't have those conversations anymore with people about like if there's this visceral reaction to it because I just
Yeah.
don't believe that that's the truth. It's not like this one day decision. It's a series. It's abuse. You've been abused.
Mhm.
People have to understand that I was abused, and I
Yeah.
continue to be abused as an adult. It was a severe abuse, like abusive relationship with both my
Absolutely.
parents. So it's so that's what I think I just wanted to make it clear that it's not like this half-hearted decision when you do that.
Right. And you said many things that I want to touch on. The first one about forgiveness, when people say, well, you should just be the bigger person or whatever that is. Here's what I think, and I think you have similar view, but I'm curious what's gonna be. This idea that you can forgive someone, you can absolutely not carry around whatever that is. It doesn't mean though that then you snuggle up to them at the holidays or whatever because that's what you do. You can forgive somebody in your heart and be clear and whatever you want to describe that, and still make the choice that hey, that person, as much as they're struggling in their journey and whatever they're doing, they get to go and do that, right, on their path, and they get to make their choices. But I'm just not choosing that that's going to be there for me. That this idea that it's like one or the other, you either forgive them, right, or you're in this no contact. It's like, actually, I think there's a lot of forgiveness that does happen in no contact because I think if you again, anybody that's coming to this is not coming to this lightly. Like you said, it's not because they forgot to wave at you when they're driving by your house, yell
Yeah.
at you or whatever. It's a process of doing so much inner healing of our own, again, abuse and where the boundaries are, that to me, you really do. You're not. I know some people, like actually me, when I was in my 20s, I did go no contact in a very reactive state. My nervous system was like from my childhood was just absolutely upside down. And my parents were like in my face, in my face, in my face. My husband at the time, who I was married to, was in like a war with my family, and I just couldn't take it. And so I was just like, all right, I just have to put you on this side, me like them on this side, and somehow kind of straddle it. Now, when I did that back then, when I did go no contact in that kind of like chaotic state, I had every known stress body thing. I had irritable bowel. I couldn't leave the house. I was going to poop myself silly most of the time. I had a skin rash for months that they couldn't figure out. That was, I know, all the stress, didn't know where to go. And so, again, I think also, too, sometimes when we're talking about this, like, at least for me, in my experience, it was like, okay, I tried it. It was a it was a mess. Then I went back, right? Like there is this like kind of going back and forth a little bit as you're figuring out. And again, my 20-year-old self versus my 47-year-old self has a very different view about what it means to love myself, protect myself, and all of that. So I know I kind of started one topic and then meandered, but I'm
So
sure you
I went no contact with my parents for 2 years. Then I went 8 months. Then I've gone 16 months. Then
yeah,
I've gone so I over the course of the last however 20, 25 years I've done different things like that too. This
yeah,
time around feels a little bit different to me, but here's what I have to say to a lot of people is sometimes it's just a boundary that can be set. It depends on who the other person is on the other side of it, right? You can sometimes just set boundaries and they're very clear cut. You can even like around the holidays, if we're discussing the holidays, it can just be like a time management, like, hey, I'm going to go there, but I'm only going to spend this much time, or I'm going to, when I am talking to this abusive person or this person that, I'm in an unhealthy situation with, maybe I always need somebody beside me. Like if I just make sure that there's other people around because I don't want to feel cornered. I mean, there's ways to set boundaries. Sometimes it's not going at all. Sometimes it's I can't talk to you at all. So everybody's boundaries are different and for different times in your life. And I don't, there's the time that you did that, so much was learned from that.
yes,
Like, there's no judgment if there's I've decided to go no contact, and then I've decided to contact again.
yep,
Like, so what? Like,
yep,
okay, like,
yep.
okay, good. Like,
I'm trying all the paths and
try
detours
to
and avenues. Yes, exactly.
and different times call for different things, and different situations call for this. And like, I think the most thing that we can do is like not there's so much guilt and shame and judgment around it. Gosh
Yeah.
dang, there's so much of that, right? Like, um, and and let me share this with you because I think this is really difficult. And I know that there was been some interesting things that even just happened yesterday with my family, like some very interesting things. But um my brother and I had extremely different relationships with our parents. We both lived in the same home. We both had the same parents. We were treated differently and our situations were different. The way that he views, um, although he sees it as abusive, his abuse was different. His was abuse was a very different than my abuse, and it was very. We were treated very differently. We both acknowledge that. We both know that, and it's but so our the way that we respond is gonna be different. So we have to let go of judgment of the like, if you have siblings or
Yeah.
if you have a best friend who, might have had the exact a very similar situation, but she's handling it different. There's there's no judgment on how somebody handles it. Maybe somebody's really angry right now with their parents and, like, you're not so mu you don't have a lot of anger.
Yeah.
There's no judgment around that they're angry and you're not, or they're sad and you're not, or they're like
Right.
it's gotta you have to start to stop judging yourself for the way that you feel and the way that something you know what I mean? Like, I think it's
Absolutely.
such a guilt and a shame. It's exactly what we talked about when we first opened, this idea of like, their family,
Mm.
they're this, you have to like that is such an outdated idea. It's such an outdated idea. Abuse is abuse is abuse.
Yeah.
It
And
doesn't matter
think
who or
about
what.
how many generations, I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, the people that I work with, how many generations of abuse, right? It's layered on layered on layered on layered. And we were all like kind of, I guess, in this survival or whatever this belief was like, it's your family. So you have no option. You just be quiet. So you carry the secret, you carry the shame, you carry the guilt, you carry the disalignment, right? That whatever this is, how you have to be versus how you would really want to be. And I think it's like this is a time right now on this planet where so much is coming up to be revealed. And we're not meant to keep rinse, lather, repeat all these patterns and these beliefs. Like you said, this one that this family one is anchored in for people. And I run up against it with a lot of people in my inner circle that are like, what are you doing? And you're right, it can feel very much like we're kind of like the outcast too of the family, right? Because we're trying to break some patterns and disrupt. Our friends don't necessarily get it. The people that were in relationship, like I'm talking about spouse, lover, partner, not necessarily getting it. Your siblings not understanding. There's so much that is, again, it can be a very lonely path to walk when you choose it.
Mhm.
And as you said, when you love yourself differently and you decide, okay, I'm not going to carry all this guilt and shame. This is other people's judgment and other people's things that they're still working out. It does bring you to a place of peace. Not everything's perfect, but there's a place of peace that I know you and I both have found it
Mhm.
in traveling this these
Well,
journeys.
I don't like that saying blood is thicker than water, because
Mm,
for me it wasn't, and it
mhm.
isn't.
Yeah,
It absolutely wasn't, and it isn't. So, I think when people say that, that might be true for them, but it's not true for me, and
yeah.
that's not my story.
And do they even really again, I'm just curious at how much people again, we don't want the things like we've built these towers, right? Like based on beliefs. And if you start poking at them and say, you know what, you are more important. Your health, your well-being, your care is way more important than anything else around you, then things start to crumble. And I think that there's a fear that if we go all the way into some of these narratives, like it's the devil that we know or whatever, people go, okay, well, yeah, that's just how they are, right? Or whatever they say to be okay with things. And again, everybody's on a different spectrum or different degree of this. I'm not saying everybody's family is like yours and mine, where we had tremendous amounts of abuse. It's just an interesting thing to me. Again, and like you said, there's so much noise around. And I know for you and for me, one of the things is like, I don't need to defend myself. I don't need to justify my actions. That was really hard going through all of this. And I don't know what it is, but the holidays, at least for me, is like because my family wants to pretend,
Um,
right? This was their MO. It was like, oh, we're this beautiful, loving holiday family, and kick it up 20 notches. And the abuse was horrible. I can think of the things that happened over the holidays, as a child. It was horrendous. So here you are, you have this beautiful, like ideal, picturesque vision of what you're supposed to have or what it's supposed to be like. And then you have this, but you're not even allowed to talk about it, right? You're not, how do you rectify that as a child? So it's just interesting when you say it's like, yeah, it's nobody else's business, which is also something that gets people going. They expect
yeah,
some kind of explanation.
yeah,
What
I
do you
don't
mean? What are you talking about? Couldn't be that bad. I
it's
always hear couldn't be that bad.
I know. Oh, yeah, I know. That's a big one,
Oh,
right? And,
oh,
like, they know. I think usually that has something to do with them more so than it does with us. I used to have, like, a re I used to just have so much more guilt and shame about all of it,
yeah.
and now it's like, "No, that's their guilt and shame."
Yeah,
Like, that's not mine. That's
yeah,
the abusers.
yeah,
Like, that they should feel the guilt and shame. I don't need to feel the guilt and shame. I didn't do it. I was a
yeah,
child. I was a child. Like, I
absolutely.
was their child. Like, I don't that's theirs to
Mhm,
carry, not mine anymore. And I can let and it doesn't mean that it goes away, like, things will trigger it for me,
mhm,
weird things, or it doesn't it's not like I walk around and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going no contact," or, "I don't talk to my parents anymore, and everything is great now." That's
yeah,
not what it is. That's not what it is. It's just what's real. It's just the truth. I'm just living from like we talked about in the friendship episode, like this idea of like authentic relationships.
mm,
Well, this is part of that. It's part
yeah,
of just living a life in your truth. Like, and for my truth is I have parents that are abusive. They're still abusive. They're, they have things that are wrong with them, and, they will not ever look at the abuse that they continue to
mhm,
do. Could they continue to do? This isn't something yes, it started in my childhood, but it continues.
yeah,
So what's best for me and my family and my mental well-being is to not have contact. And that's again, we can a lot of people don't need to go necessarily that far. They can set some boundaries, and maybe those people that are on the other side will even respect those boundaries. I don't
Mhm.
know how far I would never be able to tell somebody else, nor would you, what would work best for them. I
Absolutely.
just know what works best for me
Yeah.
at this moment. Today, this is what works best for me. And
Yeah.
I think, um, I don't know, I think it helps other people to be up when we say that it's okay. Like, I think it helps other people because not a lot of people are saying that this is okay to struggle. You're supposed to go to the holiday thing. You're supposed to show up. You're supposed to put a smile on your face. You're supposed to,
Yep.
blood is thicker than water. Family's so important.
Yep.
Like you said, it couldn't be that. It shouldn't. Probably wasn't that bad, or like It's all of those things, and that's how you get stuck in bad marriages too, and get stuck in bad work.
Amen to that. Amen to being stuck in all the places. You're right.
Yeah,
You
all the
and the
places,
way it's
relation
all
should feel
related.
like it's something to do with you, and
Mhm.
maybe it's just what it is, and maybe
Yeah.
that's okay. Like, maybe this is the hand you're dealt,
Mhm.
and it just is. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't, do I feel sad because I don't have a mother and a father, and I don't have a relationship with them? Yes, but I never had a relationship with them.
Yeah.
It wasn't real.
Yeah.
It was me putting up with abuse in a
Mhm.
cycle, and
Mhm.
me shoving it down so that I could pretend and be in the same room with them. It wasn't, I didn't ever have a mom that I could call and, like, talk to about my day or talk to about my
Mhm.
problems, or who'd help me with my kids, or I mean, my mom couldn't have watched my kids for 5 minutes. That just wasn't something she was gonna do. So it wasn't like, um I but I had but the what the what I was taught was you just show up anyway. You pretend like that's the case. You pretend that we're all
Yes.
everything's happy, and you pretend and you pretend. And at some point, at least for me, I just decided, no thanks. I
Yep.
don't want to pretend anymore. I'm exhausted from pretending. How about
Mhm.
I don't pretend? And how about I just be around people who love and care about me, and that's that.
Yeah.
Like, I just kind of wanted it to be I just kind of wanted life to be lighter.
Mm. I love this idea too, because again, people love us chatting about this because I think the holidays is it kicks up a lot of things for a lot of us. And but I love this idea of like if you weren't gonna pretend this year, right? Like if you looked at your social obligations, gift
Mhm.
giving, not you, but like
Yeah,
collective us, you, and you said, okay, I'm not gonna pretend. So I'm not going to that. I'm not doing that. This is what I want to do. I'm going to do this instead. And coupled with this idea, which I absolutely love what you just said, surrounding myself with the people, right? And again, I think that this is part of, again, letting go of the older narratives or the narratives that are just so indoctrinated for the like, okay, who does love me? Those are the people, right? Those are my family that might not look like traditional family on paper or what have you, but I've curated, and I think, and maybe I'm wrong about this, this is just a theory, that people who have not had traditional loving and care create things. I know you and I both have created it outside of, our traditional families of origin. And so it's like that to me is what I want to nurture. That's what I want to care about. And I love this idea too of like, how can I make this time of year, November, December into January, even because, then January kicks up. We got to all have our shit together and have some kind of vision for the new. It's like, how can it just be lighter?
mhm.
And it's like, does this feel heavier to me having to go to this for 3 hours? Ooh, could I stop by for a half an hour? Like you said, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, but really playing around and experimenting with what it could be for me and allowing yourself, like you said, permission, because the guilt and the shame and the shoulds and all the things don't really truly belong to us. They belong to other people, but a lot of us, especially when we were younger, we took them on thinking that somehow they were ours. And so it's like that process of like, okay, that her reaction or his reaction or their reaction isn't mine. And every time, this is my favorite thing to say to clients, every time you choose you, everyone around you has permission to flourish for themselves, right? And it might not, and when I say that, I don't mean it's going to look like everybody's dancing in a rainbow.
Yeah. Mhm.
And it also, right? Because the more, like you said, the more we talk about it and we're transparent about it, we give other people, everybody's giving each other permission to do it the way that feels the most authentic for them. And I think that whenever we can do that for each other, that's the gift. You do it for you, it ripples out. Even if you don't tell anybody, it's still the energy of that ripples out.
I think we talked about this on the friendship, episode or the friendship podcast as well that we did, but there's a period when you go no contact or when you set boundaries or
Mhm.
when you maybe end a friendship or you change whatever that is. There's this loneliness and
Mhm.
people don't want to be alone.
They don't.
But for me, and I've talked about this before and I talked about it in the friendship episode, I already was alone.
Mhm.
Like, I was in a room full of toxic people, my
Mhm.
family, and
Mhm.
I was excruciatingly alone. I
Yeah.
felt more alone in that room than I do now that I'm alone, right?
Yeah.
So it's
True.
that but that feeling people wanna, I don't know if you've noticed this, there's a collective anxiety of wanna keep moving, wanna keep doing, we've talked about this
Mhm.
before, and, but that goes with this family stuff too. It's this idea of, like, let's look, keep putting on the charade, keep going, go to this holiday party, do this. And I feel like I mean, it's been upscaled. Like people are doing stuff. I'm watching this and I'm like, wow, like what over committing to things. Constant holiday party, this. And I think like 90% of it, they like absolutely don't want to do. And
Yep.
it's weird to it's very strange to me because I'm like, I don't do any of that because I don't want to, but because and I also have collectively I have these relationships with people who would never ask me to.
Mhm.
Like, they would just be like, "Oh, Kelly likes to, like,
Yeah.
whatever." Like, like,
No, it's
you
true.
know what I mean? Like, so you and I have that understanding because 'cause we're friends, and then, like but, like, you're the people that you love and care about, these people that you're in your inner circle will understand you, and they'll just, like, love you for whatever, and it's these expectations and all of this stuff, it's just, it's an interesting thing to watch as a collective whole when I feel like I'm kind of standing on the outskirts of it. I think
Mhm.
people are afraid to stop, afraid to slow down, afraid to feel, afraid to do kind of the inner work that maybe you and I do and have
Mhm.
done. Um, because that feels very scary and change is scary. Doing something different is
Mhm.
scary. Um, you don't feel like you even have a choice at some point because you get so collectively involved in it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, how many clients have you had, or I know people have said to me too, like, they'll say things like, well, but I have to do that. Like, we
Oh,
always do that. And I'm like,
oh,
"You don't
absolutely.
have to do anything." Like,
Yes. And I'm like, I always go, well, wait, who, what, who's making it? Right. And they won't even stop. It's funny
no,
because I'm sure they don't even stop. That is a completely thing that they absolutely believe in
it's
that moment.
foreign. It's
Exactly.
foreign to think of not do like, they'll gasp. I mean, I'm telling you that I have close relationships, like my husband, who would he gasp when I say, "Well, we really don't have to do that." Like, it
Yeah.
gasping for
Oh,
air,
my
like,
husband too. Let's
wait a
be
minute, like,
honest.
we don't
What?
do that. If
Yeah.
we don't do that, it's going to be like,
Mhm.
it's just like, no, if we don't do that, like,
It'll
it's
be
gonna be
okay.
fine.
Yeah.
Like, it's actually maybe gonna be better. Like, we're gonna
Yeah.
be okay. Like, everything's gonna be okay. Like,
No, it's
it's,
true. It's so true. And I
but
think
then
that you,
you have to face things when you decide to do that. You're
yes.
facing your own inner it's your own inner child, your own inner like, there's lots of things you could call it, but, like, you're having to face yourself, and you're having
Mhm.
to ask yourself some really serious questions like, who am I? Who do I want to be? Who do I want to surround myself with? You have to get very authentic and very real with yourself. And you have to stop long enough to take a breath to
Yep.
say, this is what I like. This is what I don't like. This is what I want to participate in. This is what I don't want to participate in. And get very clear on it. And then but that's gonna be met up with so much. I mean, what I'm saying, I feel like for the majority of people, I think is jaw-dropping. Like, I don't think that most people can contemplate,
Yeah.
like, they're like, "No,
Well,
you
it's
just."
very uncomfortable. To be honest, everything you just said, and you and I know because we've been in it, you paired with all of that, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable and be in the discomfort.
Mhm,
And the discomfort of telling somebody no when they go, "Wait, you're not gonna go to that this year? We
mhm,
always go," right? Like, again,
mhm,
think about all the things and all the way people try to convince us to do whatever it is that they want us to do.
mhm.
Also, too, because they're like, "Wait, I don't have permission. I haven't given my permission
You
to say
know?
no, so you don't have permission to say no," right? Like, that's how that
Mhm,
can play out. And it's like, are we willing? And again, especially holiday, lonely, you name it. It's like, can we sit in? I have been the loneliest, to your point as well, at holidays where I was surrounded by my first husband, you name it. And I can just remember like sitting in a dark room, like later by myself, just crying and sobbing and
mhm,
feeling like my heart was breaking. And I was like, I cannot keep going. And to your point, sometimes all the pretending and the going, there's something, at least in my life in the past, something usually blows up in a, some kind of emotional crisis, health crisis to get my attention to be like, we have to stop this. This, whatever all this is, isn't working. And since you're just going to continue to go along with it, we're going to try to get your attention. I don't believe it always has to be like that, but at least in my, especially when I was younger, that happened to me a
mhm.
lot.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, like, whether they get sick or whether they have to use alcohol or drugs to
Mhm.
get through a holiday or whatever else they're doing, um, I think they're going at such a rapid pace, and they don't even acknowledge any of that.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't be like they might get sick, but they wouldn't acknowledge maybe that there's a reason behind the feet, like, because maybe they're running so fast and they're so run down and their body is shutting down and saying, "This doesn't feel good. This isn't okay." But instead of listening to that, they're just like, "Oh, no, I'm just sick. I'm just gonna put myself through antibiotics and, like, let's just go. We're just
Yeah.
gonna keep it." Like, it's
I see it.
be
You see
able
it
to
too. I know you do.
stop to be able to stop and say, "I've had enough.
Yeah.
I'm gonna change the trajectory of my life. I
Mhm.
have decided that today is going to be different. I'm going to do some different things." That's big. Like, that's huge. That's that's not like, and then you have it go 2 ways. You have people who are just, like, drinking, eating,
Mhm.
sexing, whatever,
Oh, the
shopping, their way
spending.
shopping,
Exactly.
their way spending
Oh,
money for the holidays,
absolutely.
right? If I buy a big enough gift, then this all goes away, or if
Mhm.
I get a big enough gift, this all goes
Mhm.
away. This feeling when that's not true, but it's just a constant, we're going like, "Oh, let's go on this trip. Let's go." We're so rapid. And then the other end of that spectrum is forgiveness and love and just go sit there. You can love
Yeah,
them
yeah,
away.
the
If
unanchored
I
love and
can
light
love my
bullshit.
abuser enough, if I love my abuser enough, they'll stop
Mhm.
abusing me.
Oh my god.
That's a big one. Like, people will bypass it,
Oh,
right? They'll
absolutely.
bypass it by doing
Yep,
or using
yep,
or shopping
yep.
or like whatever. And then they'll do it by like, well, if you were spiritual enough,
Oh,
or
yeah.
if
How
you
many
were
times
a
have you heard that?
loving and kind person, you
Mhm,
could just forgive them. So
mhm.
you're the problem.
Yep.
That's
If
I
you
can't.
fix
Big one.
yourself. Fix yourself
That's
and
a
you
big
can make it.
one
Yeah.
for my family is, well, you're the reason that you can't be around us is because basically you're an unforgiving bitch. Like, you
Right.
know what I mean? Like, you're unforgiving, you're selfish, you're I mean, it's like, oh, like it because it couldn't possibly be that,
Right.
they do these things. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so
Nope.
it's an
They're
int
not
but
gonna
it's
take
but then you
responsibility.
question yourself. Am I making the right decision? Are these because sometimes when you set boundaries or you go no contact, it feels really shitty and it really feels bad. And so you're like, well, if it feels bad, then does that mean it's bad? And sometimes it's like, well, no, it's not necessarily feeling bad. It's just feeling uncomfortable because I'm doing something different.
Exactly. And I say that all the time. It's like just because it doesn't feel like you just like, pooped a rainbow, that doesn't mean you made a choice that isn't the best choice for you. It's going to be ragingly uncomfortable. That's usually the sign that you're onto something. It's like
Mhm.
keep going, keep practicing, like you said, keep practicing whatever it is that is going to anchor yourself in what like love and care and compassion, because ultimately that's all we really truly can do. We can't control anybody else, even the people that love us. So it's like, to me, I also anchor into I am willing to be misunderstood. I'm
Yep.
willing to be judged. I'm
Yep.
willing to and again, not that I like it. I'm not saying, "Hey, come on in." However, when you are willing to be that and you're willing to say, "You know what? Not everybody's going to understand that.
Nope.
It's okay." I don't It doesn't mean I'm wrong, doesn't mean we don't have to get into a big battle, but it doesn't mean that I have to take on, like you said, extra guilt, or I have to drink extra because I've got, somehow I have to figure out how to get this feeling out of me and what have you, because that's another thing that I definitely have experimented with over the years, all of the things to try
Always
to numb
felt
the pain.
I think I got to a place because I mean, I stopped drinking and the overeating, and I started to heal my relationship in those areas. But I think I thought for many years that I thought I needed to get to a place where I was so healed
Yeah.
that they could no longer, like, I was gonna be so healed and so forgiving and so loving and kind that I was gonna be so above them that I could be in an abusive relationship
Yeah.
and be above it all. And
It's
that
the
is such bullshit.
It is, and it's like the queen, the upper echelons of bypassing. And this humanity, again, this goes back to me. You can forgive and you can do all the inner work you want to do, but that doesn't mean you need to like, again, it's like you've said that to me so many times, Stace, just because you can doesn't mean it's actually the right thing. Could you be in a situation with all sorts of things being thrown at you? Sure, you probably could. However, does that actually, again, does it help you be in alignment? Does it help you feel lighter and more peaceful? Does it feel like love? And to me, it's like it's got to pass all of those, right? You can't just say, okay, I can make myself, because I have all these practices, do it. And somehow then again, like that, I think is where a lot of people, especially people dipped in the spiritual practices, can get a little bit sideways, myself included. I've been sideways with that myself.
Yeah, like, I think everybody has a little bit, but
Yeah.
I think sometimes we were listening to maybe some people that maybe weren't,
Huh,
maybe we
I don't
figured it
disagree with
out.
that.
They don't really have the or, like, best interest. But anyway,
Sure.
but I think that it's, one more thing when it comes to that. I mean, I think, like, the example that I sometimes give is, like, okay, so, like, let's say you had, like, a dog, like, your dog, and, like, your dog's, like, happy and it was in, like, it was an abusive place where, like, the owner always kicked it. So
Yeah.
then you bring it back, you heal it, and then would you bring the dog back to get kicked again? Like, no, you would never bring him
Never.
back. Well, why are
We
you
will, but
abusing
isn't it so
yourself?
funny what we will allow, because in the name of family, right? In the name of family, there's like there's no boundaries, codependent, you name it, all of these things. And it's like, you and I know, it's like, no, we are not going to stand and just repeat these patterns
But
anymore.
that's your dad, but that's your mom, but that's your sister.
Yep.
I mean, if I've heard, like, that's your brother, that's your
Yep.
you hear that over and over again, and I just am like, "No, that's not cut it. That's not gonna that isn't that's just not the truth.
It
That's not the
isn't.
truth." The truth is that, that's just not the truth. They're abusive, they're toxic, they're abusers, and
Yeah.
they just so happen to be my mom, and so happen to be my dad, and so happen to be my brother.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, I didn't choose this. This is just what happened, and I get to choose how I respond today, every day could be different, but I have to choose what's best for me, um, today. And again, like you said, I think a lot of us do things because we're afraid of, like, it's like a pride ego thing, sort of like, oh, what is it going to look like? Or what are people going to say? Or how am I going to be judged? Or that person's really not going to understand this. And it's
Mhm.
like, once, when you can let go of some of that and be like, well, they don't need to understand it.
Yeah.
They don't
It
need to.
also gives To me, it feels so much like to your point about being exhausted when you can say that to yourself. I
Yeah.
don't have to I don't have to make that a job to worry about how everybody else is going to perceive this. All I need to do is put my energy on myself right now.
Yeah.
There's there is a freedom. It feels liberating. Again, it's not like liberation maybe in this like idealist sense, but it really does. And the more we practice it, I think, and you can weigh in on this too, but the more you do it and the more you practice being uncomfortable and the more you just are in it, like you said, you even have boundaries now where you're like, I'm just not even going to like explain this stuff, right?
No,
Like that's a boundary for you that
no.
you decided. It's like, I don't need to go into it, especially when people are having the visceral reaction to it. It's like, that's a clue to you to say, okay, then this is a good place for me to close whatever this part
Well,
of the conversation is.
some people are in relationship some people that you might be in a relationship with, um, don't wanna understand you.
Well, that's true.
Like, they don't. Like, there's they
Absolutely.
don't they're set out to they have an agenda, and the agenda is, "I'm going to this is what I think is best for you. This is what I think you should do. This is what I would do." Like, there's
Absolutely.
much more like it's because I think what happens when you set a boundary with a parent or something, and then you have
Mhm.
a sibling that's not, it strikes something in them. Oh, like, I think it's very it can almost be aggressive.
Mhm.
And I remember so yesterday, there were some things that happened and I was talking to my brother on the phone, which is very rare, and so it was a big thing that happened. So I said, he said, "Well, what if mom was, like, really dying of cancer and, like, it was stage 4 and, like, she was dying and, like, would you come?
Mm.
Like, wouldn't you come then?" And I said, "I don't know." And
Mhm.
he, like, couldn't take it. He was just like, "Well" he thought that was very mean. He thought that
Mhm.
was very mean, and, for me, it was you have to understand that, like, I don't have a mom. I don't
Right.
have someone I can call up on the phone and talk to or tell them
Mhm.
good things or bad things, or I never did. I've
Mhm.
never had a mom. So, this idea of, like, her physical death,
Yeah.
well, she's not that she's I don't wanna say, like, she's dead to me because it sounds weird, like,
Right.
it's not
Right. Right.
like but
Right.
she's not there.
It's
Like,
like
it's
a
not
stranger. I mean,
yeah,
almost.
yeah,
It's like she's off doing whatever like 20,000,000,000 other people on the planet are
yeah,
doing that you're
yeah,
not paying, close
right.
attention to too. But again, it's so interesting because it's like an I just think of like apples and oranges, right? Like we want to whatever the word is. Anyway, you want to basically layer this idea like, oh my God, your mother on deathbed. But again, without any of the context of the entire
Right.
right thing, which is like this is almost like a stranger because we don't have this
Well,
relationship.
for me, my mom has for me, it's been a death.
Yeah.
Do people understand, like, when you don't have a mother, when other people have mothers that are helping
Mhm.
them with their kids or baking cookies with them or, like,
Yeah, just
even not don't
sending a
even
text
that's
message that says, "Hey, I love you. You're doing a great job."
yeah, or like I can talk to you or go to you for advice or help, or I can any of the things that maybe you would use for a mother or a father for that matter in
Mhm.
my circumstance. Um I didn't have that. So my reaction to their physical death is going to be a little bit different than probably most people because
Absolutely.
there wasn't a relationship anyway. Like
Yeah.
I think people are like, "Oh, they're dead." And I'm like, "No, you don't understand like there wasn't anything anyway.
Yeah.
Like, I
And
it's
they're putting like you said, their relationship, how they feel, what they would do, and putting it on
with
you.
my but in my circumstance, I believe and I don't think he'd mind me saying this. I think my because we actually had this discussion. I think my brother's reaction to that was because he feels the same way, but he would
Mhm.
feel too guilty not to
Guilty.
show up.
Yeah. And I think that that's where, kind of as we close today's conversation, because I could talk to you forever
Yeah,
about this. I know
yeah.
we could. But I think that that's kind of where somebody can start, where we all can practice, right? This like, what am I feeling guilty about? Because the guilt is manipulating me to do something that maybe isn't exactly what's in my heart.
Mhm.
And maybe you just ask the question. You don't have to act on anything, but you just start to get curious. Like, I know you have this great question, and I'm not going to be able to think of it, but you also said it in another podcast. It's like, am I willing to look at this a little bit differently than I
Yeah.
have in the
Am
past?
I
Something
willing
like
to see this differently?
yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like, can you see where your guilt, where whatever that is, you're
What's
going to something
blocking
you don't
you?
yeah, you don't wanna
What's
doing
being
things you don't wanna
blocked?
do. And
Yeah.
it's not showing up the way you wanna do. And maybe that's where you start. You just get curious with that first before you do anything. You're not making yourself change your path immediately, but you're really just starting with the, like, where am I using guilt, or where is guilt being used in a way that's not serving me so great
Well,
anymore?
and if anybody is listening to this who's been in any is in any kind of toxic relationship, whether it's with um, a sibling or a spouse or a parent or even a child or something
Mhm.
like that, um, I just want them to know that like it can be different and you are okay and you're going to be okay and it can be lighter, it can be better. Life can be very good. Life can be very good even if you've been abused or are being abused.
It's true. And we both stand here and as people walking that walk. So you're right. It's not the easiest. And you know what though? It's as much as it is a heavy topic, I have never felt more joy and lightness in my life. And I know you feel that
Mm.
way too. So it is possible and it's not as complicated as I think, whatever the stories would be that would offer it up
Yes.
like can't
Yeah.
change. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Oh, love. Okay, so we've gone into all the messiness of holidays and no contact, whether you listen to this now or in July, it still will be relevant. And Kel, if people want to find you, where's the best place to get connected to you?
That's interesting.
Hmm.
They could go, you know, I guess they could just go. I like people messaging me sometimes on Facebook. So just like Kelly Backert on Facebook Messenger or Core Bar and Yoga or Core Boot Camps is fine too. But you could just do Kelly Backert.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll put all of that in the show notes as well. And if you are interested in talking about this further, you can always pop over to my Facebook group, Everyday Enchantment. We're always talking about these kinds of topics, and we would love to support you in any way that we can. So thank you so much, Kel, for being
Thanks.
here and being willing to dive into these, these messier topics. I'm always coming out of a conversation with you having something that I can think about or look at differently. So thanks for that, Kel.
Same here. Same here. It was fun.
And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in. Get all the delicious details and links we've mentioned in this episode in the show notes below. If you'd like to chat about this episode or learn more about how to work with me, come visit me in my private Facebook group, Everyday Enchantment, or check out my website, staceyandon.com, where you can find out more about my Leap of Faith coaching, my Map Makers group program, and the School of Intuitive Magic. Plus a special shout out for all the production and editing of this show by Richard Wilmore. That's it for now, love. Here's to living a life enchanted. See you soon.